From absolutely killing it at the gym to Kamaru Usman's confidence being at an all-time low. Here are the reasons why Leon Edwards will destroy Usman. Starting with an obvious one. Edwards has more striking power than Usman.
I'll put into words, Joe. It's been a long fight for 4 years. The old doubted me I couldn't do it. The old said I couldn't do it. Look at me now.
There's no doubt about it. Edwards' striking is no match for Usman. Yes, Usman is a very strong fighter himself, but when compared to Edwards, there really isn't any comparison. Usman's been working hard on his striking for a long time now. I mean, he was always this strong, but since he started MMA, he's been polishing his power and making the best use of it with MMA. But there's one problem with him. His striking power is completely limited to boxing, and he's not that powerful when it comes to his feet, but Edwards is. Maybe it's because of the wear and tear on his knees, but it's a really big weakness in his fighting style. Usman only relies on 3 things during his fights.
Tough one because, you know, the whole gym situation, you know, me leaving. And, you know, first and foremost, guys, you cannot discredit what...
Jabs, straights, and crosses. That's it. And if one of these goes wrong, the fight's over for him. This is where Leon Edwards, being a southpaw, comes in handy. He has beautiful technique to take out the jab of his opponent. He traps his opponent's lead hand using his own lead hand, leaving him without many options. And we all know what happens when Kamaru's jab is neutralized. To avoid punches from his opponents, Usman tends to slip his head to the outside or the inside. You'll all probably remember what happened the last time he did this against Edwards. Usman became a victim of a brutal head kick from Leon. But see, Leon Edwards isn't only better than Usman in MMA, he's better than him at wrestling too. A lot of fans might have missed this last fight between the two, but Edwards' defensive skills were out of this world against Usman. He had an answer to all of Usman's attacks.
Edwards has to completely reset everything. He doesn't have that same feel, that same rhythm that he had a second ago.
The only way the Nigerian Nightmare is successful in takedowns is by the clinch.
He said that Edwards has never faced a wrestler of his caliber. That may very well.
This is something he loves to do and relies on most often. But unfortunately for him, this is something Edwards excels in. And especially in the first round of the last fight, Leon's defense was incredible. Edwards used his forearm to perfection. He placed it right on Usman's jaw and started shoving it right away. This completely broke Usman's posture and it created a lot of space between the two. This meant that Usman isn't as close to his opponent to go for a punch. This was brilliant thinking by Edwards, but his wrestling's still not perfect.
And that's what you got to do to a striker. You got to make him respect your striking, and that's what Usman's doing here. He's landing big shots of his own to set up his...
He needs to work on his intercepting elbow. Usman was constantly looking for some space to hit Edwards with his punches, and when Edwards blocked every path for Usman, he turned at an inward angle, which created a bit of space for him to pounce on. Edwards should have countered him with an elbow to kill off the opening that Usman found. Instead, he tripped him to the ground. It worked that time, but it isn't going to work all the time. He just needs to improve this little part of his wrestling. Otherwise, all is good. Speaking of things being good, all wasn't good in Leon's last fight.
Also, I couldn't do it, and just look, I did it, you know, and like even like now, getting like goosebumps, just like saying it.
He was suffering from his environment, but it won't be the case in the upcoming fight. Edwards rarely gets tired in between fights.
Return, right? Because like growing up, like in Jamaica, my dad was like the leader of the gang where I grew up in, like was born into in Jamaica, you know, so I've always been around like violence.
He has great cardio, but as we saw in the last fight, he got really tired as the fight progressed. And this is because of one reason, the environment. See, the fight took place in Salt Lake City, and y'all know Salt Lake City is at a high elevation, which means the air you breathe is very thin. It makes it difficult for fighters to fill up their muscles with oxygen. Something similar happened to Cain Velasquez when he was in Mexico City for his fight against Fabricio Werdum. Because of the high elevation, Edwards' energy was very limited. Usman should have made use of it better, but he couldn't. It was a huge advantage for Usman because he's used to training at high elevation.
To the thighs here, which if he can really accumulate some of those, he might be able to slow Usman.
This was no problem for him, but he still couldn't make the best use of it. Also, this won't be the case in their upcoming fight. The upcoming fight is in London, and there are no such problems there. This means Kamaru won't be gaining any extra advantage over Edwards in this one.
I'm above sea level, right? And Usman trains in Denver, Colorado. It's like 7,000. So his body's completely used to that kind of air, you know, so I think that was one of my worst performances in my career.
And when Edwards isn't facing any external problems like this, he's so dangerous.
Hey, thank you for Cowboy for giving me an opportunity. I looked up to him as a young kid, and it was an honor for me to fight him in there tonight, and thank you. Thank you.
He can even finish that fight in the first 2 rounds if things go as planned for him. But winning an MMA fight isn't all about being strong physically. You've got to be strong mentally as well.
Switch stances, but he prefers to fight out of that southpaw stance. big shot.
And Edwards has an advantage there as well. Why? Because Usman's coming off a brutal knockout and his confidence is shattered at the moment. You can never understate what effects a knockout has on a fighter. No matter how experienced you are and how long you've been a professional, it still affects you in many ways. And a knockout that brutal? Whoa, I can only imagine what must be going on in Kamaru Usman's mind. One of the greatest fighters of our generation, Khabib Nurmagomedov, said that he isn't sure if Usman will ever be the same fighter after that knockout. Coming from someone like Khabib, you know what kind of situation he's in.
This is, like my opinion, like most safe place in the world, because I was in London, Moscow, Dagestan, Turkey, US.
Kamaru's set to turn 36 in May this year, meaning his physical condition will only downgrade from here. Plus, it was the first time that someone knocked Usman unconscious.
That is not the cloth from which he is cut. I mean, that is a dejected...
And from now on, he'll always have this thing in the back of his mind. I mean, it's not as if it was a normal UFC fight loss.
Hey!
We were writing his obituary.
Oh my goodness.
Leon Rocky Edwards.
Like, he wasn't tripped to the ground by his opponent and then finished with some punches. No, he took a brutal head kick to the side of his head and he was put to sleep right then and there. Usman won't be able to take shots the way he always used to. And if that's the case, nothing can save him from being defeated once again. Also, no matter how strong or skillful a fighter you are, you still need to train before any fight. This is something Usman didn't get to do. Why? Well, because he was recovering from a head injury. And recovering from injuries like these take a lot of time.
Yeah. That one was a little weird because I'd be living in Florida for almost nine years at that time. So, I felt like a Floridian.
Right.
And then they started
like,
booing. I was
up?
like, whoa,
Like,
I live here.
And the doctors stopped Usman from doing any kind of high-intensity training until he is fully recovered from the injury.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to really explain, but you get to a certain point to where people start putting expectations on you.
I mean, we all saw him wearing a headband in the last week of December, right? He never went straight to the gym after that loss and started training for the next one. This means he hasn't had enough time to train for probably one of the biggest fights in his career. And if you go into fights like these unprepared, you get destroyed. Usman will be nowhere near his peak condition in the upcoming fight. And this is something to cherish for Leon Edwards, because he has been training for this one for a long time. He had all the time in the world to train. This only means one thing: Leon Edwards will be crowned winner once again. Rocky himself is confident of winning the fight. He said it's time for him to settle the score. Plus, Edwards also said something shocking about Usman. He said that when he was fighting him the last time, he felt like Usman isn't that good. That's a huge statement for someone like Usman. It shows how confident Edwards is about winning that fight and settling the score once and for all. And that's all for why Edwards will destroy Kamaru Usman.